Aurelia,
No,
did you want to get in on this? Because, like, you could.
ooh, is he hanging out? Where is he?
I get he's lurking around because I only know one SOB that does Sunforger.
Oh.
Yeah. Might hop in the chat. Give me a second. Oh yeah, no, totally good. If you want to pop in, just either if you want to pop into lobby or if you just want to like casually stay in the thing.
Yeah, I figured it might be better if I just, instead of camping your chat, I just joined.
I mean, either or.
What's up?
Well, that's good.
Oh, nothing too much. I thought I was about to say, considering you're gonna do your first episode on removal.
This is all about removal, so it'll touch lightly on board wipes and stuff like that, but like the way that I had it planned out was going to be like, how does your deck function with removal? How do you like plan for it when you're deck building? What do you consider removal? And then like corner cases of like, do you think this is worth it because this is a trend with removal and some other things like that?
Yeah.
So welcome to the stream, everybody. I am Lord Mordino. I'm joined today with Aurelia and Accidental Dad, and we're here to talk about removal. But before that, we got ourselves a couple pieces of good news just to kind of start off the day. We got a palate cleanse before we talk about murdering each other's stuff. So I found something kind of interesting. We got the world's first vaccine to help out the honeybees so that their declining population can hopefully like curve back around. Honeybees have kind of been on the decline for the last like couple of decades, and like pesticides and some other stuff like that has definitely been like hindering their growth, and they are very crucial for a section of like our farming and agriculture. So it's nice to see that they're getting some love. And also Tony B is here, so we're just on theme, you know?
That is very cool, actually. I didn't know about that.
I also went and looked something else up, like recent science breakthrough kind of good news thing. And in the topic of like renewable energy, as of 4 days ago, we've had scientists that were able to make a little leaf that turned into, like, they were able to, when exposed to direct sunlight, it was able to take the hydrogen in the air and turn it into a gaseous form. And pretty much like when it does that, it makes renewable energy.
That's bitchin'.
Yeah.
I'm here for
Wild.
that. So, alright, so this first episode that we were going to do was on removal. The thing that kind of sparked my interest in starting this was I saw a Twitter poll, and I don't remember if it was... I don't remember if it was like Joel... Is it Joel and Jake? Joel and Jake are magic? I'm probably fucking it up. I'll fix it later, but I don't know if it was them or like some of like the CDH people, but they did a poll and they asked the question, how much removal do you run in your deck? I haven't been in Magic for like ever, but I always kind of poked around and like who has what of like card draw, removal, board wipes, all that kind of jazz. And I had always heard that 10 pieces of removal were like the standard queue for this kind of thing. And that made a lot of sense to me, and so that's how I've been kind of deck building, and like, not to kind of like spoil the section of like, hey, what do you guys run for removal? But like most people were... Here, I'll put it to you guys. What do you think the average amount of removal that people were running was?
I want to say that's tricky because it actually, I believe it depends on the deck archetype. What are you building?
I mean, I'd say for like any normal deck, if you're like just brewing, like let's say you just find a commander and you're like, all right, cool, I'm building a deck, like here we go, you pop open like your collection and you see the mountain of cardboard. How much of it are you dedicating? And I'll say this, single target removal.
Okay, so me personally, I build my decks, like, if I'm building a Voltron deck, I'm going to have a significant amount of removal.
Okay.
In a way of protection.
Okay.
I'll probably have 10 or 12 cards of, like, move artifact, remove creature, because I want to be able to get through, you know?
Right.
Like, if I'm running, like, my Dina black-green life gain deck, I don't have close to any removal in that deck, because the whole point in the deck is I need to gain life as often and as much as possible.
Right. And, like, corner cases, like, oh, I'm going to steal people's stuff. Like, you don't want to remove things that you're going to steal. And, like, in the instances of, like, if you have a commander that can target remove. So, like, let's say you're running, like, Zakama, who has, like, the ability to, like, just shoot things. Obviously, your removal package is probably going to be lower in those instances just because you have a reliable, repeatable, like, removal. But, like, cards like Swords to Plowshares or Beast Within, how many of those types of cards are you running in your average deck?
Personally, maybe 5.
The number that pops into my head personally is about 7 or 8 pieces.
Okay.
But that's usually only because if I am building some sort of jank combo,
Okay.
It is much more mana intensive than usual.
Good
I got,
example for like mine too. I'll only run removal in a majority of my decks if it has either a dual purpose or it has the ability to kind of get around things, right? Like I'm not going to run much destroy unless it has destroy this and this.
Okay. See,
Or
to
unless it's exile, because exile get around the indestructible, and most things that are a pain are it's like, oh, here's my indestructible whatever. Like now it's your problem, like a Perforos deck, for example.
yeah.
Yeah.
See, for me, that just sounds ludicrous. I run like 10 pieces of like removal in most of my decks, like just when I'm building it. And then if I feel like I'm killing people faster than like their small little things are getting me, then like having 8 removal in my deck, I'm seriously in the back of my brain. I'm like, where the hell are my staples? Like, where is my like rapid hybridization or beast within? Or if somebody plays like a couple of cards that just totally ruin my game plan, like I have been uprooted by like a single enchantment more times than I can count. And in my head, I'm always thinking like, there's gonna be this boogeyman card across the table, and I have 3 chances to like get hit by this thing. It's gonna slow down my game plan. And like, I know this is like a weird instance, but we were playing kind of like a fun game over the holidays, and everyone that we had a party with a whole bunch of people, and a lot of them were playing Magic. So we were like, oh hey, bring over some stuff. There's enough of us that we could at least have a pod going at any given time, and everyone could enjoy the festivities. And everyone ended up bringing the Tyranid deck from the 40k commander sets, and they were unaltered decks. So we had 6 people playing, and we decided to have this like monstrous 2-headed giant game. And it was all Tyranid decks versus everyone else. And we were like, oh, this is like a fun flavor win and everything else.
Yeah.
I don't remember what this card was, but it completely shut us down. It was an enchantment, and it said if an opponent's creature would be targeted with a spell or ability, that player sacrifices it. It was basically like turning everything into an illusion and giving it that illusion clause. And Tyranids target each other to give each other +1/+1 counters. And like those...
So then they just...
Well, and then, like, one of the guys that was on his team was playing Thassa, and Thassa can target things with just, like, some dumb... I think it's, like, a tap-down ability. And it was just like, oh, somebody targets our stuff, and then basically it was just, like... It was like Dictate of Erebos, but only for us. Like, it was just, getting sniped. And we played an hour-long game, and, like, we can't play this because this target's on upkeep, which means we lose something every upkeep. And, like, we had 3 decks... and we were all targeting each other with stuff, and we were going to have like a big overrun effect. So in my brain, I'm always thinking that there's going to be those cards that shut us down or make it super impossible to get any sort of game plan going. And like, if I find myself in a game where I don't have any removal at all, I'm just thinking that there's always going to be those corner cases where there's going to be something that gets around it. Some indestructible creature that's always a blocker. Or like some flyer that like I just don't have flyers, or I just can't block it, or it's targeting me because I'm the next threat down the line. And
yeah.
So like in my brain I'm like, damn, like are people really... And the average like run of like people doing removal was 5 to 6, and I was like, I'm running 2 times as much removal as everyone else, and I don't even always draw into mine. So it's like, oh shit.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think that's more also in your experience and your gameplay strategy. You run like you're saying, you run across that a lot, where it's like you have that one card that just shuts your entire deck down. It's like, shit.
And there's always like, there's Sanctum Evolve for like Oshentai, and there's like Sterling Grove for like Sithis. Like there's cards you're always gonna see with certain commanders that like take their game plan and put it into the sky, or like Aura Shards or something like that. And I always think that like to be able to interact with someone else's board is like the most key thing for a deck, because like you are like you're thinking to yourself like if I'm a combo player, I'm gonna need like 3 or 4 pieces for my deck to really hum. And if somebody removes one of my things, or if one of my things gets shut down by somebody else's things, and you got to remember, at least in Commander, there's 3 opponents, so the amount of people that are gonna want your stuff to not work is so much higher. So like in my head I'm like, you gotta have things to blow that up.
I can't tell you how many times I've been playing Aurelia, and it's like, cool, I got 9 equipment out. I'll cast Aurelia, and then some Simic deck is like, cool, I'll flash out Collector Roof.
Yeah, and then you're like, shit, I can't get any of my stuff online.
Yep.
So
absolutely I can't even equip them. I cannot even pay the mana to equip them.
Yeah, so I like in my head,
So-
I'm like, it just
But
sucks.
that's also what I'm saying. Like, I'll run removal. I'll run like 5 or 6 removal cards. For me personally, they have to be cards that have like dual capabilities.
Okay.
Like speaking specifically on one that I love running in my green decks is the Boseiju Who Endures, the land. Another example would be like a Broken Bond. Again, in the color green. Broken Bond is a one generic, 1 green sorcery.
Hmm.
It's like destroy target artifact or enchantment. You may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield.
Oh, see, if I'm playing Golgari, I'll play Assassin's Trophy is the one where like you kill something and then they get to fetch a land.
Yeah.
I played the opposite. The 4 mana
So-
one where I get to blow something up and then I get to go fetch a land.
Death Sprout.
Death Sprout, yeah. Death Sprout is one that like I run to very, very often, at least in Golgari. So let me ask this: like, what are like go-to removal spells then?
Ooh, I mean, mine is a fan favorite across Red in general.
Okay,
Chaos Warp.
I despise Chaos Warp so much. I hate Chaos Warp with like a burning passion.
Here's my train of thought. Chaos Warp, it's like I have it and I can use it to get rid of somebody else's thing. Like somebody else drops something big and ugly, like let's say like Arcana Cruelty, which I also have to be able to talk about on here, you know?
Okay.
But somebody drops something big and ugly and stupid like Arcana Cruelty, and then you can Chaos Warp that. Like get that thing out of here. Hopefully you get like a reassembling skeleton out of your deck or something.
Okay.
Like a Arcane Signet or something, yeah?
Okay.
But I love using Chaos Warp, like I said, that dual purpose kind of card that can also Chaos Warp my things.
Okay.
Like I can, I got this little 1-cost red goblin
Okay.
on the field, and I can Chaos Warp that goblin. Hopefully I get like some cool artifact out of my deck or like a 6-cost thing, and it's
Yeah.
like it has that dual capability.
Right.
I love that I'm able to do it to my own stuff as well.
The only time I have considered putting Chaos Warp into a deck was almost always to target my own stuff. So for anyone that's not familiar with Henzi Toolbox Torre, he's a commander that like you run and you can kind of comfortably run really giant creatures in, because Henzi basically says, your creatures that have over 4 mana in their mana cost have Blitz, and the Blitz cost is
Here, so I've got it pulled up here. The card straight up reads, it's a black, a red, and a green to get them in play.
Yep.
Each creature spell you cast with mana value 4 or greater has Blitz. So we're talking about the big, ugly creatures. We're talking about possible Eldrazi's. We're talking about ones that have the flavor text that it's just, chef's kiss. These are cards you want on the field.
It's Jund doing exactly what Jund wants to be doing, because like you're constantly
Sure.
sacrificing your own stuff. And like this is my Henzi deck runs an absurdly high mana cost. Like and like not to like get into like deck construction too hard, but like most of my decks peak around like 3.2 on like the low curve of like the mana cost for my deck. The lowest I can cast the cards out of my Henzi deck is 4.5.
Yeah.
But that's because, like, if I play a Henzi twice, my mana curve is 3.5, which is a lot more manageable, and I end up killing my own commander a whole bunch of times, or I'll just get free attacks in, because sometimes I can commander damage with him out of nowhere just for funsies. But if I play him 3 times, my curve of the deck is 2.6, so the late game gets so much better for him. So, and like a lot of my creatures end up creating tokens. So I considered running Chaos Warp in my Henzi deck, so that way I get Chaos Warp as a token and cheat out my, giant Eldrazi or my giant, like, whatever. And, like, that was the direction I took for Chaos Warp. I didn't even keep it in the deck because I had, truth be told, I put Advis as Mahdi in there instead. And he does a Chaos Warpy kind of effect, but it kind of lets me hit a bunch of things. But as far as like Chaos Warp to me, like when I think like what is like for me, that's like a fun thing to do. That's not removal in my brain, because removal means that I got rid of a problem. And I
mean, in that same conversation, you did get rid of a problem. You took one and made them put it back in their deck.
I mean, yeah, but I've also on a couple of times cheated out something else that was worse. not me personally, but like I have seen Chaos Warp be used and somebody gets a giant trampler and like it's either the same problem or worse problem. For 3 mana, in my brain I view mana costs of removal very differently. If it's 3 mana for me, like I view it in a certain light. And if it's more than 3 mana, I view it in a different light. And if it's like 1 or 2 mana, then like I'm just happy to be here kind of deal. Like Chaos Warp for me just doesn't feel like removal because I'm running the chance of not removing it. And like sure. I feel like, and like I get that like it gets rid of so many problems because as long as it's not Hexproof or Shroud, Chaos Warp can like put something away. But for me, I like it just doesn't feel like removal to me because it just doesn't fully get rid of a problem that you have. And even for 3 mana, like let's say it's just a land. Like let's say that's like the best that they can hope for is that you just cheat out a land. Like then I'm ramping them and like I always feel kind of wheezy whenever I have to give like a good advantage to an opponent. Like I will find a way to use that advantage to kind of get people. And Chaos Warp to me only removes. And if it was anything else, I feel like I would feel so much better about it. But the chances of it running something else out just horrifies me when I'm deck constructing.
If that's how you feel about Chaos Warp, how about let's go in the same realm of not truly removing a threat.
Okay.
How do you feel about a lot of the enchantment removal? Like, and not enchantment removal as in like getting rid of enchantment, but things like Lignify and like Kenrith's Transformation or Imprison in the Moon. Okay.
Imprison in the Moon I feel differently about. And I love Imprison in the Moon. So the commander change zones ruling. When your commander moves zones, no matter which zone it's going to, you can put it in the command zone. Which is also why Chaos Warp really sucks against a commander, because you don't have to shuffle it into your library, but you can still flip. Yeah, but then you can still flip off the top. So it's not as like. But Imprison in the Moon.
I was actually gonna say like these kind are in my like pain in the ass category of removal.
Oh yeah,
because it's like I build a lot of my decks. They're commander centric. Like my decks do a commander thing. Like if it's a Voltron deck, it's because my commander is Voltron. If it's a life gain deck, it's because my commander does life gain. You know. But these are like my pain in the ass cards where it's like, well, my commander's not gone. I can't recast them, but I can't do anything with them.
Yeah. Really, what's we kind of glazed over you for Chaos Warp. What's your feeling on Chaos Warp?
I kind of want to go back to what you were saying earlier. Chaos Warp is, I don't want to say it's in the realm of Chaos Warp's weird. Chaos Warp is in, I want to say, kind of its own little zone in terms of removal.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't actually permanently remove anything. Because going back to earlier where you mentioned Perforos decks, or like that particular Thassa that was just hosing the Tyranids. It sort of is like, cool, you may have like Chaos Warped that one thing that you really couldn't deal with, like again Thassa or Perforos, but in that same instance, now you know it's still in that deck somewhere. And if it's like a Dimir or an Esper deck, you bet they have 7 tutors lined up with that card's name on it.
And that's also in the existence of like higher tier play where like a lot of tutors exist, or especially any deck that just has black in it. It definitely starts to become a lot bigger of a problem.
Yeah. One of the main things is like, if it's a bad Chaos Warp too. Like imagine you hit that 3 or 4 mana Thassa, and suddenly you flip over a Craterhoof Behemoth, and they're in their pre-combat main phase. It's like, oh.
I will also leave another caveat that I didn't say before. I've never built a mono red deck, and I know that mono red has some it has some problems with removal and card draw specifically. I think I would feel a little differently about Chaos Warp if I only could play red, but I'm kind of famous for building 3-color decks, so I don't usually have that problem, and I can kind of spoil myself with whatever kind of removal package I want. But no, I totally, like, I see that too.
It's weird because it's going back to the core ideals of Magic. where they have like color identities and like their rationale behind it. So like white is holy, it's justice, then red is more like aggression, passion, and emotion. Green is like growth, like going back to those like core ideals of magic. All the colors excel at their own things. White, of course, probably excels at removal more than, gosh, probably any other color.
I would agree with that. I think
Yeah, I
that
was gonna say a lot of the cards I have pulled out are in white, and I was like specifically trying to find ones not in white because we know white does the thing very well.
yeah.
Oh yeah, extremely well. I want to say white is like the undisputed king of removal. Red
That's a fair
isn't-
amount of destroy.
I
mean-
I would definitely say that like having red removal doesn't guarantee killing anything, and that always makes
Yeah,
me feel
that's
weird about red removal.
Can we talk about Black's horrific sacrificing? It's personally the worst because it's like, oh, I have hexproof and shroud, and I did all these things to protect my stuff, and it's like, well, now you have to sacrifice a permanent, and it's like, ah,
Yeah,
come on.
all right, you're talking about like flashback marauder kind of effects.
Yeah. Now going back to the favorites, I have mine in mind. I've actually got it pulled up here on my stream. What is your guys' favorite or most fun removal?
Okay, this is gonna blow your mind. My favorite is Imprison in the Moon.
Okay.
No, legitimately, like I saw that there was a secret layer with Imprison in the Moon, and there was a tear in my eye. I was like, this is beautiful. So, enchant a creature, a land, or a planeswalker. I've never done it to a planeswalker. I did it once to a land. Like, Imprison in the Moon is my favorite thing because it solves something in such a way. Because, like, I feel like not a lot of people are ready for enchantments. And playing Imprison in the Moon, not a lot of people remember the fact that they can just get rid of Imprison in the Moon and get their creature or their thing back. So
That's where I feel with a lot of the ones that are like that. Again, Darksteel Mutation,
Yeah.
Kenrith's Transformation, Lignify, Song of the Dryads, all these things that are like enchantments on something that just kind of rip it away and make it a different thing.
yeah.
It's also like it's so easy to get rid of, but at the same time is not. And it's like I didn't get any of my removal, so I guess my commander is a land, and it's like
Right. And not everyone runs like self-sacrifice effects, and not a lot of decks run like sacrifice a land effects,
exactly.
which would also free up like your commander or something else. Darksteel Mutation, I think, is a very interesting case, because Darksteel Mutation is not nearly as safe as Imprison in the Moon, in my opinion. We're talking about two different colors, and that should definitely be said. Mono white is not going to sit there and be like, I would have run Imprison in the Moon, because it just can't. But Darksteel Mutation, you have to think about that one a lot closer, because if you Darksteel somebody's commander, that is still someone's commander, and it still registers commander damage. And there's a part of me that's got like war flashbacks where Aurelia had the war leader out, and I Darksteeled her. And all of the sword ofs were just piling onto this thing. And the worst part about it was now I have given indestructibility to a creature that is now pro everything except for white. And now I'm getting beat the hell out of because it's indestructible. And like, yeah, it lost all of its power and most of its toughness, but indestructibility just, like, it becomes a separate problem entirely. And
Yeah,
it's got,
it's
Oh,
the same
I
thing
love
with
that.
like Kenrith's Transformation, where you turn their commander into a 3/3.
oh yeah. I
Like,
think
in terms of Voltron, it's like, okay, it still has all of this equipment on it. It's still big and disgusting. It's
Right. I think that Kenny Transformation is fun for me because you also get a card out of it. And I think in the realm of 3-mana enchant removal, I run a lot of this. Is it 2?
Kenny's is a generic and a green.
Oh. You learn something
Yeah.
every day?
Super good. It's card draw and enchanted creature lose all abilities and whatnot.
I mean,
It's
shit,
like, if
I would pay 3 mana for Kenrith's Transformation. I do it for Imprison in the Moon, no problem. And like that hits
Yeah.
far less targets. So like I would be down with that one being 3 mana even. And the fact that it's 2 and it gives you a card, like shit, hit one of my tokens with
Yeah.
it and draw a card out of it. Boost some of the power if it's like a 1/1. Like
Yeah,
that one
there
has
you
some. That one doesn't have to be removal, but like as far as enchantment turns something into a thing. Song of the Dryads I think is really good. Lignify, I don't know if I love Lignify. Just off of like the fact that it's got such a high toughness.
Sure.
Like if you're like if you have an option of building like a new deck and you have 3 colors, like I usually am in the position of like I don't turn to Lignify because it doesn't change it from one thing to another. And I'm always kind of scared if it's still a creature because you can always cut a deal with somebody. So somebody's got some big like death touchy creature or some like chunky beast or Hydra, and like someone can retransformation to your commander. They're just gonna turn to that guy and be like, "Hey, you wanna let my commander out?" And like they'll be like, "Can I get immunity?" And then all of a sudden, you pin a target on your back.
Right back out.
Yeah. Or like I'm just gonna keep swinging at you until I get my card back. And in certain scenarios, I don't see that as being destroyed or solved. It's just kind of stalling it out. And at least when I'm building removal, I'm like, I want to solve a problem, not like unless like
my one that I find to be the most fun though is one that instead of solving the problem, I create more problems.
What
sounds like you, Tony.
What are your favorites in that category?
Fractured Identity.
Oh, okay.
Fractured Identity is 3 generic, white and a blue, target non-land permanent, and then each player other than the controller gets one.
That sounds so great, especially if it's like, let's say it's like a token generator or something like that. Like, just think for a moment. Everyone's sitting there, and one person is clearly the threat, and then, oh, I draw this card, and you look across the table to the threat, and they have an Avenger of Zendikar.
Yeah, and then it's just like
everybody gets an Avenger of Zendikar. Like that sounds so, like it sounds like sweet justice. And I'd hate to put that in a deck where like I'm the problem. And like you have to think that you're also getting a copy of whatever that thing is. And like that could be interesting for sure.
Oh, that and one of the things is like I love it in the sense of like the chaos that it brings, right?
Oh yeah. No, I'm 100% with that.
It's actually really interesting that you mentioned Fractured Identity, because one of the, I think, craziest things I ever saw, they cast Wedding Ring.
Ooh, okay.
And then Fractured Identity did.
Ooh. See, that's like a cool combo, cool interaction piece. I love that. I think that
Then they were just polygamous.
Well, what they did was,
if anyone's seen if anyone saw the last game nights, Wedding Ring made a very prominent appearance in that episode, and I'm not gonna ruin it for anybody, but if anybody loves Wedding Ring and loves the idea of multiple people having a wedding ring, I'm just gonna kindly point everyone in that direction, because it was just fucking hilarious. And like, do not doubt the fact that Wedding Ring will like absolutely change the game state. I want to run down some cards, and I want to kind of hear you guys' thoughts on it. So let me just to preface this section, and it'll kind of give you my thoughts ahead of time. Do you guys consider counter spells as removal? Like when you put a counter spell into a deck, does that occupy a removal section?
no.
No. I also don't tend to run a lot of blue.
Okay. So why doesn't counter spell for you guys equal removal?
When I think removal, I think it's on the board, let me get rid of it.
Okay.
You know? And for me personally, like, I know this isn't common knowledge to everyone that's watching, but prior to this, we had talked about like board wipes we weren't counting as removal, and we weren't going to like really dive into with this. But to me, board wipe is removal, you know?
Okay.
There's problem on board, it needs to go away. Versus counterspell it's something that it didn't even get a chance to be there.
And like as far as that goes, are you considering it like you want to make sure that the game is fun for everybody, and so you want to let them do their thing, or are you considering that like you're only one of like 3 targets, so it might not be your problem?
Exactly. When it's my problem, I remove it, kind of thing.
Okay. Well, Aurelia, what do you think on that front?
Well, counter spells are pretty much entirely blue. There are some odd instances like Mana Tithe and
I do
Guttural Response.
I do run Mana Tithe, and then I also run the black one that counters a creature spell. I forget what that one is. I run that one from time to time.
Yeah, it's like those are single instances though.
So do you think blue
Yeah.
has its own kind of removal outside of counter spells? Or do you think that blue is kind of premier for that? Because I know like everyone was making a big deal when DMU came out because blue was getting like its first like board wipe that said destroy, and it was that saga that like on tier 3 it destroyed all creatures that had like a thing on it.
I think blue has its own forms of removal still,
Mm,
because it still has cards like Pongify.
you're right.
So blue has
and I
its
know
form of
there's
removal in
another
Pongify, and also like a return to hand kind of thing. Like actually, Mixon's in the chat here saying that they really like deflecting SWAT in the realm of like.
Oh yeah, like bolt bend, deflecting swat.
Yeah.
I've also seen some people use fork in a fun way, where they basically copy a spell and then like, oh, you did something scary. Let me do that too.
Yeah.
Do something else.
Done that
So-
myself, actually.
Does deflecting SWAT count for, like, does those types of effects? Because those are mainly red. Do you guys consider those to be removal?
I keep deflecting SWAT in the same category that I keep counter spells, where it's like this isn't necessarily removal. It's almost like a anti-removal.
Okay.
You're trying to get rid of something of mine, and I'm stopping it.
Okay. So
Yeah.
in like the grand scheme of like attrition, I think when I view removal, and I think this is kind of where I might be, like if you guys are running 5 or 6 and then like you guys would run deflecting SWAT and some other stuff like that, I think that starts to balance it a little bit more in my head, because I'm not like always just trying to remove things. When I think of like removal, as far as like the give and take, the push and pull of like a commander game, I'm thinking of removal as like, I'm gonna try and take away from the other people's boards or strategies to give my strategy some breathing room to get going. So like for me, like counterspell, stifle, all those types of things sounds like you're not allowing something to go off, because they're like removal for spells and board wipes and stuff like that. Like I view it as like, how much mana am I putting into something versus anything else? So like stifle is something that I was also going to say, like, it's not a traditional like counter spell because it's not countering a spell, but it's doing an activated or triggered ability. Would you guys consider that to be something of removal? Or is that just kind of the same vein as a counter spell?
That's definitely
The silence.
Right?
Yeah, it's something I hadn't really like put much thought into it in that way. I'll run things like where it's like it takes up a cantrip spot where it does a second purpose.
Okay.
That's where I tend to keep my removal. It's anything that I'm doing to stifle somebody else.
Right.
I also want to fit into growing my game plan. You know?
Yeah.
Not necessarily, I would say in the sense that you put it, like the way that you categorize your removal in your deck building process.
Mm.
The way you categorize it, yeah, definitely it would be like counterspell would go in there, or stifle would go in there, because that would be a form of removal in the sense of the way that you categorize your deck building.
Right. Right.
For me, I would have like, let's call it, just because I have it here for this exact example purpose, Cinder Vines. Whenever an opponent casts a non-creature spell, it deals 1 damage to that player, but at the same time, I can sacrifice Cinder Vines to destroy an artifact or enchantment. Like,
Right.
to me, that's removal that fits into my deck building process instead of just stopping someone else to further the time that it has for me to get there.
Right. I will say Seal of Cleansing, and there's another one that are just kind of like 2 mana art like enchantments that you can put on the battlefield, and then they sacrifice to destroy a target artifact or enchantment. I love those effects. I don't like to overrun a deck with those, mainly because I like kind of keeping myself in the casual vein. So a lot of my deck building I also kind of put in the vein of like, I want to build this for casual, and I feel like leaving those landmines out there where like Cindervines is kind of fun, and like Gruul really hates like non-creature spells and stuff like that. So like it almost seems kind of thematic to throw something like that in a deck.
Yeah, exactly.
So in my head, like I don't want to play like 3 or 4 of those out, because then like people are like, oh, I don't want to play the game because my stuff's just going to get blown up. And I don't like putting that precedent in a game, but like it won't stop me from putting those cards in the deck, but it just won't, like I don't want to overrun it because they're always super mana efficient. Like for me, 3 mana is a really nice removal rate. Like I'm not sad to spend 3 mana or to hold up 3 mana to remove something. And Cindervines is nice because it's 2 up front, and then you can save
one
that
later.
Yeah, but you can save that last one for whenever, and it's instant speed. You just get this chance to kind of do whatever you need to, and you can leave it out there. And I love the dual purpose of this, where it just does something, and then also it'll do what you want later, but it'll do something now, because it always hurts to hold up removal in certain instances, because like
Yeah.
you're not doing your game plan, and this is one of those ways of turning something that's normally sorcery speed into something that's instant speed. Aurelia, what do you think on like Cindervines and those types of deal?
I want to say those are sort of conditional forms of removal.
Okay.
If you were running a deck like Sithis Harvest's Hand,
Right.
yes, immediately throw those seals in there. That's fantastic. If you're running something like Rurik Thar,
I did put through.
passing
I-
that Cindervine
I
is going
did-
to hurt unless you have lifelink on him.
Oh yeah. Well, for those of you that don't know, the fever dream that was my Rurik Thar deck, it was mostly non-creature spells, but I just gave Rurik Thar lifelink, so I would just end up I'd end up gaining life out of me casting things instead of losing them. And then Cindervines is also something that works with Rurik Thar. If you don't know, Rurik Thar does 6 damage on cast for non-creature spells, and that affects everybody. And Cindervines will also do that, but in early game, because he's like a 6 mana drop for Gruul. And
you drop Torbrand and a bunch of other fun mana damage doublers.
God, I didn't even do that either, and mine was still mean. Yeah, no, I love the bombs. There is a downside for anyone that's like, ooh, these guys are talking this up. This is the greatest thing in the world. It does show your hand a little bit. So the one obvious downside is that it's sitting on the battlefield. Anyone can see it. It'll get caught up in board wipes. It's something that isn't a panic button that only you know about. So people can definitely play around it. And if you want to give people that kind of a thing, or if you're an expert political player, and I try to be political, but no one ever trusts me because everyone thinks I know what I'm doing too well. And what they don't know is that I'm always panicking from the second I mulligan for the first time because I never trust my first hand. I'm peeking over at your screen there, Tony, and I see you keep creeping over to Vengeful Strangler, and I feel you and me are gonna have a very similar conversation about this one. Why don't you lead this one? And Aurelia, I want to hear your thoughts on it because I have a feeling that me and Tony are going to agree on this one.
Okay, so personally, I love Vengeful Strangler. What it does is it's a little 1 generic and a black. Vengeful Strangler can't block, so it's primarily used for attacking. You can't do anything else with it. Or you can sack it. You can use it as a little sack fodder. Because when it dies, return it to the battlefield transformed under your control, attached to a target creature, a planeswalker, and opponent controls. And at the beginning of your upkeep, permanent's controller has to sacrifice a non-land permanent and they lose 1 life. So, that being said, it's one of those I'm gonna make it a creature. I'm gonna put something disgusting on it. Or if I see somebody else that's running a bunch of disgusting stuff, I'm gonna try to sack it on my own. That way, prior to my turn. That way, on my turn, it's well, now you have to sacrifice a permanent. Go for it.
Yeah. Aurelia, what do you think about this? Would you consider this removal?
I would, but again, it would go back to the seals from earlier, as it would be that niche type of removal.
Okay.
So he definitely works in that sacrifice type of shenanigans.
Right.
So it would be much easier to kill off that little guy than trying to get somebody to block it, especially if they know what the other side does.
Right. As far as Vengeful Strangler and then flipping into Strangling Grip, do you guys consider that targeted removal? When I build for removal, sometimes I look at Vengeful Strangler as targeted removal, and sometimes I look at him as removal, and it'll sound redundant, but I really want to get rid of something when I think, here's my slot for that.
Right, I consider Vengeful Strangler one of those dual-purpose removals. It's a generalized removal. It's not a great removal by any means, because you can't target what it gets rid of, and in late game, it's okay, I have to sacrifice a permanent. I've got 12 lands, 5 treasure tokens, 2 token creatures. It's okay, I'm just going to get rid of one of these other random little things. I'm not going to get rid of my key pieces that are on the board.
Right.
So I think late game, it's not useful at all. It's just, like I said, I feel like it's a dual purpose. It's a turn 2, if you've got it, get it out. Then try to beef it up to throw it at somebody. Worst case scenario, they kill it, and then now it's somebody else's problem. I put it in the same category as a lot of the other creature removal.
In some instances, especially in token decks and stuff like that, if you think that this against a Voltron commander is just crushing, because it enchants them, and if they don't have any sort of protection against black effects or anything else like that, they're gonna have to sacrifice some key piece of their deck. And in that instance, you can say, oh, this will kill a very specific problem for me. And in my brain, removal the way that I bring up removal is I want to kill a thing either now or guarantee that I'll kill a thing now. Like Strangling Grasp, you'll eventually get to the point where the only thing they'll have to sacrifice is whatever you slapped it onto. The deck that I ended up using this card in was a Sylvar and Trin deck, and the reason for that is that Sylvar has a sacrifice a human effect, so it allowed me to very quickly be able to kill it, slap it onto something. Sylvar gained indestructible and a 1/1 counter. So in my brain, I worked it a little differently, and it played a more key part of my strategy. But like, if you're gonna play Vengeful Strangler, you kind of have to know the tempo that it goes off of. It's also considered slow removal. Like, it doesn't get rid of it on the same turn. Like, it won't get rid of it on your turn. So you kind of are leaving it up in the air, especially on an untap. So
I consider it the same like category as, like, let's say Archon of Cruelty. Like, Archon of Cruelty way better, but it's also an 8 cost. You know?
Yeah,
what I mean?
yeah.
But I feel like it's in the same realm as that, where it's like they get to choose the sacrificed card, but it still sucks when it's like, all right, well, now I have to throw something on my board away. Yeah, we had somebody jump in and mix in here in the comments talking about would we consider Hirobi Death Whale a removal card? Hirobi Death Whale, 2 colorless, black, flying creature. It's a flying 4/4, so that in itself personally has value to me for 4 CMC.
Yeah.
Whenever a creature becomes a target of a spell or ability, destroy that creature. Personally, I like it. I think it takes a lot away. Voltron decks. We had talked about this earlier. That pod that you were in with all of the Tyrionids.
Oh yeah, this would have absolutely murdered the hell out of them.
Yeah, this would shut that down immediately. So yeah, honestly, I like this card. I would put it in the same realm as the dual ability. Like, have it in the deck as a flying creature. And then maybe you can even, being a legendary creature, you could build a deck around it where you're constantly targeting opponents' creatures with spells or abilities. But I would also kind of like tier 2 it personally, because it is a destroy ability and it does say creature and not opponent control.
Played against somebody who made it his commander. I think it's a strategy removal card for sure. Aurelia, do you have any like thoughts on this one in like the realm of like removal? Because we could also talk about like Dictative Erebos effects with this as well. It's something that I would consider just making everything paper thin.
I actually looked at this card, and my first thought in my mind was Hapatra, Vizier of Poisons.
Yeah.
Which throws neg1 counters on creatures. But it's like, oh, cool. Instead, I'm just gonna nuke it. It's basically a modular board wipe.
Yeah, okay, so
mana, it's just one-sided.
I'm glad you said that. I feel like we've covered this card a little bit, and I had written down like Dictative Erebos, and it kind of helps kind of tie in that part of the conversation together.
I actually need to pick up a Hirobi Death Whale. That's insane.
Yeah, no, it's $2. So okay, I have a tap down spirit deck. And it's not in black, otherwise this would get locked in there really fast, because that deck ends up just tapping down people's creatures, and this would just make it so that I just blow everyone's stuff up. Alright, so I want to bring this up. So there is lots of removal spells out there that remove more than one creature. Something like Curtain's Call or Hex. Hex kills 6 creatures. At one point, does a spell stop becoming targeted removal, and when does it start becoming a board wipe?
Okay, I'm gonna say that it stops becoming targeted removal. It targets multiple things.
Are you saying like if it's 2 or more, it's a board wipe?
No, I'm saying like it loses the target on it.
Okay.
Like it starts affecting all things. So a good example would be
like Vandal Blast.
Vandal Blast.
Vandal Blast. Vandal Blast individually targeted removal. Vandal Blast overloaded. Now we're talking like board wipe removal. It kind of falls under the same Echoing Ruin, destroy target artifact and all other artifacts with the same name.
Okay. So if we exclude the word all, at what point do you think you'd say it's a board wipe and not like a targeted removal?
Well, one idea might be going back to Strive of Heroes. You can target either one thing, or you can pay for it to target multiple for each extra target.
So we've talked about it a few times. It's 1 in the green, instant. It's also got a strive cost. Choose any number of creatures, double the 1/1 counters on it.
Love it in Hydras.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, that would be great for the Hirobi Death Whale, but I would say that it stops becoming targeted removal, and it becomes more so board wipe removal after number 4.
So 4 creatures.
If you're blowing up 4 or more things, I would classify that out of removal and more so mass removal or board wipe. So to
Okay.
speak.
I think I'd be inclined to agree on that one too. Another card that like I don't play a whole lot, but I dream about putting in my decks a lot is Windgrace's Judgment. It's 3 black-green, instant for any number of opponents, destroy target non-land permanent that player controls. It says all the right things without having 3 in the cast cost, because you can basically destroy 3 things for like 5 mana, which is definitely, it's basically like 2 per each one. I think that like being able to blow up one thing off of everyone's board still picks it as targeted removal, just because I get to pick it. What about in situations where like Fleshbag Marauder? Do you consider that removal, or like do you, if you don't get to pick it, is it still removal in your brain?
Yeah. So I think Fleshbag Marauder kind of goes under the same. Cause a lot of times when you get to sacrifice is that form of removal where it's like gets around all of the stuff, gets around hexproof, shroud, indestructible.
Okay.
It's like it is removal. It's just it's not. I'm gonna come out and say it's not good removal.
Okay.
Because it's like something like this where each player sacrifices a creature. That Voltron deck is gonna be screwed, you know?
Right.
Then you got somebody that's playing cats and dogs thing.
Oh,
or-
Jenny Faye.
Yeah, Jenny Faye, and it's like they've got 70 cats and dogs. Like, oh no, I have to sacrifice a creature.
Yeah. Somebody sacks a Scion or something to it, or does something
or like
else that's
even
weird.
like those like the Urza decks where they're making 2 Thopters every turn. Now, on that same topic though, I think cards like Toxrill, disgusting removal.
I would call that mass removal. I would actually put that in board wipe category. It's just a slow board wipe.
I'm 100% agreeing with that. I would call this a board wipe.
Okay, for sure.
I shiver just thinking about that damn card.
Those that don't know and those that aren't that familiar, Toxrill the Corrosive is somebody that can be your commander. Big, ugly, 5 generic black card. And what it does, at the beginning of each end step, put a slime counter on each creature you don't control. A big thing on that is each end step, not just yours. So my end step, your end step, his end step.
Yeah,
And
that's
if
the
everyone's
part that
turn-
everyone misses when they read that card for the first time. They're like, oh, this is kind of good.
So that slime counter that gets put on every creature that you don't control during every person's turn puts a -1/-1 counter on it. And then additionally, whenever a creature you don't control that has one of those counters on it dies, you get to create a 1/1 token, like a 1/1 slug token. -1/-1 counters, even if your creature is indestructible, if its toughness hits 0. So if you have anything that's got 3 toughness or less, before it's even your turn, is gone.
I'm gonna tiny caveat here. The slime counters are not -1/-1 counters. Like the counter, if you get rid of Toxrill, the -1/-1 effect goes away. So it's Toxrill has the effect of creatures you don't control get -1/-1 for each slime counter on them. And like Toxrill as a commander is gross because even if you kill Toxrill, if Toxrill comes back and your creatures still have slime counters on them, those negative effects still go back on. All right, so let's move this conversation over to something else. Would you guys consider pacifism a form of removal?
Pacifism is enchant creature. Enchanted creature can't attack or block, and it is a 1 colorless, 1 white enchantment.
Also, for anyone that is looking at this card, if you're not running the Lair of Behemoths one version, you're kind of dead to me because it's just this giant creature that's just slouched over touching a butterfly.
That is a lot better version than the one I was.
Yeah, you were looking at the Witch Doctor. Like, there's so many versions of this card, but this one is my when you say that card, this is the one that I think of.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat that a Mixian is. In all reality, it's like you're stopping a Voltron player. If somebody put this on my Dina deck, that doesn't affect me at all. Like Dina's out there for life gain for her other abilities. I'm not there attacking with her.
And I put this in the list of like cards that I was gonna ask about because like this is a slowdown card at best. And like and
for
again,
sure.
it doesn't stop anything. It only hinders or slows down. But like there are scary non-legendary creatures out there. It's just WotC just happens to be slapping legendary on everything these days, and I'm just I'm here just to laugh about it. And I used to run pacifism effects, but a lot of the pods I used to play with were a lot of commander damage and like keeping up big scary blockers. So I don't know where I stand on it anymore, and I think I'm more curious just to see what you guys would say about it.
I'm gonna go with, this is very situational. I can't call it removal, but the value of the card situational on what your pod, like your general play group, usually plays, along with the game that you end up in at an LGS.
I think I'd put it in the realm of tempo plays, honestly.
Yeah, I would put it in, like he said, like a tempo stacks kind of, you can only play one card a turn.
Yeah.
And a realm of art. So not necessarily removal. No.
What, like, and I'm kind of curious because I have this like progression of cards. And I would love to kind of see if there's like a point which it starts becoming removal. So I'm going to point everybody to Bubble Snare. It's blue enchantment aura. It also has a kicker for 2 and a blue, so at max you're paying 4 mana. It's enchant creature. Enters the battlefield. If it was kicked, tap enchanted creature. Enchanted creature doesn't untap during the untap step. Is this removal?
I think it gets into the realm of, you're further limiting. So this is better than pacifism. It then takes away tap abilities. So like you're not removing abilities from it, but it takes away tap abilities. It still falls under the, it doesn't remove abilities. All you're doing is tapping it. So then if you have their nasty passives, and I keep defaulting to my Dina deck. If you have something with passive abilities, then it does nothing to it.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same vein. It depends on like what strategy you're using in. Again, I have a tap down deck, so like I like when things become tapped. So this makes an appearance in that one. And then this isn't really gonna be like hey, what do you think is removal and what isn't removal? But like the next step up from this one is Tamiyo's Completion, which is like my favorite version of like this type of effect. It's just really expensive. So Tamiyo's Completion is 3 and a blue, flash, enchant artifact, creature, or planeswalker. So it hits a lot. Enters the battlefield, tap enchanted permanent. If it's an equipment, unattach it. If enchanted permanent loses all abilities and does not untap during the untap step. So this is the most purest, evilest, murderous form of the Imprison in the Moon effect. I wanted to see what it sounded like if you start stripping away certain things. So it sounds like if it doesn't get rid of at least abilities, it's not like true removal.
Yeah.
Well, awesome. Well, I appreciate you, Accidental Dad and Archangel Aurelia, for joining me while we discover what the ins and outs of removal are. A special thank you goes out to everyone who supported the GoFundMe for this project, the lords and ladies of the Nelson family, B-Fox, and Ace of Spades. You all near and dear to my hearts. If you want to play games with us or pick topics for a future video, join us at patreon.com/FromTheMaybeBoard, and join us next time from all of us here at the Maybe Board. We love all your faces, and happy hunting out there.